Welcome everyone. We are so excited that everyone is here in this room. As you can imagine, there's some thank yous that have to start. So I'm going to start with some thank yous before we introduce this amazing program speakers that we have this evening. First thank you is to Leanne Sullivan. Leanne is an alum of the graduate program Department of Communication with the College Debater at Winkler College. Leanne and the late husband John Kevin have been instrumental supporters of the Wake Forest debate program in the modern era. Before his passing, John and Leanne attended squad meetings where they would provide pizza, desserts, and arguments that won us big tournaments like the 2015 ACC Debate Championship. We have the winner in the room. John was a member of the Board of Trustees of Wake Forest when he passed away in October 2017. And in 2020, Leanne chose to honor John with a transformational $5 million gift to the Wake Debate team that ensures the future of Wake Forest debate for generations to come, including requiring us to produce a fourth and many more volumes of the Wake Debate history we will all have, the third volume right now. While we're at Dr. Loud's History of Wake Debate session, you heard him say earlier today that the key variable for the success of our program and others is having the right personnel who can advocate for a program in the university. Leanne's gift ensures that there will always be a John Kevin Medica, Director of Debate at Wake Forest University, and that means we will always have the right personnel to use Dr. Loudon's phrase for generations to come. Thank you, Leanne. We'd like to thank the event team that brought together and came together to make tonight possible. It's a great privilege of Wake Debates that one of our alums, Rebecca Atchison, who many people all knew as Rebecca premier event and design firms. She was a phenomenal debater, but believe it or not, she's an even better businesswoman whose beautiful events have earned her company the designation of Southern Weddings Magazine's top 5 event planning and design firms in the South. She wishes she could be here this evening, but her international reputation precedes her, and she's leaving in just a couple of hours for Lake Como, Italy, where she'll be producing a destination wedding at a villa next door to the Clooney's. Without Becca's team, this event simply would not have been possible. Even if we could pull something off, it certainly would not have been as special. So, thank you to Becca and Rebecca for those events. Simple hospitality, quick thank you to the amazing Aramark staff as well, who are here making sure that we have this amazing food and the drinks are flowing. The current Wake debaters, the Department of Communication graduate students, and debate coaches that are here in attendance. If you have a moment to get to know them, I can tell you it is well worth it to restore your faith in the future. Some of our graduate students just defended their thesis projects and will be put in very soon. The debaters that are here come from all over, including New Jersey, Chicago, and even South Dakota. And given the historic nature of the achievement, I want to especially thank the Marvin Perto. Marvin, if you can have a stand there, for joining us. The history of Wake Forest to win seated nationals, but Coach Dr. Amber Kelsey, who is leaving us for an amazing R1 job at the University of Colorado Boulder. But Amber has been a phenomenal part of Wake Debate. We miss Amber of you. Thank you, guys. I want to thank Coach Justin Green. We say Wake Debate, many hands make light work. Well, when you have Justin, you really only need his 2 hands, because Justin's been running errands all over campus and all over Winston-Salem for the past week, to make sure that, among other things, the after party is ready for you later this evening. Thank you, Coach. We would like to thank all of you for coming. Showing up is just not always an easy thing to do. We have people here from London, from California, from Oregon, from Washington, and everywhere in between. It shows the depth of Dr. Loudon's commitment to all of you. You care this much for him and are willing to come this evening. Our program this evening is fantastic, and I hope you will enjoy it. Our first speaker is John Graham. And I am pleased to introduce Professor John Graham of Indiana University, who will offer some reflections about the condition of weight debate in the 1970s, prior to Dr. Loudon's arrival in the summer of 1977. John was born and raised in Pittsburgh, PA, and attended Wake's high school debate workshop in the summer of 1973. After enrolling at Wake Forest in the fall of 1974, John met his wife-to-be, Susan Warner Graham, at the first debate meeting in September. Today, after almost 45 years of marriage, Sue, who also joins us here this evening, holds only one grudge against John. He stole her brilliant debate partner during her junior and senior years. Her partner was the enthusiastic transfer from Columbia University named Ross Smith. Of course, Dr. Louden later recruited Ross to help lead Wake Forest debates through an era of greatness. John's career in academia took him to Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, the Rand Corporation, and to the deanship of the Carl H. O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University. Along the way, Professor Graham served as the so-called regulatory czar in the George W. Bush administration. So please welcome Professor Graham to the stage. Here is
Thank you for that kind introduction, Jarrod. There are many facets to the Allan Louden story at Wake Forest. The debate director, the classroom teacher, the scholar, the advisor, and our mutual friend. Tonight, I will address only one of those roles, the one that brought him to Wake Forest in the first place. My assignment is to take us back 50 years in time. This is a little embarrassing. Before Allan arrived, and I will offer you an assessment of the condition and dynamics of weight debate in the 1970s. Now, thanks to decades of strong leadership from David Shirley, Wake Forest became a regional powerhouse in the national policy debate circuit. Our district's 6 rivals included the University of Georgia, Emory, West Georgia, and a national power down the road here in North Carolina called the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. In fact, one unofficial poll of college coaches ranked UNC's Loveland McGuire team #1 nationally in the entire decade of the 1970s. So we had aspiration, and we sought to be a nationally competitive team. In 1950, Wake established, we had several advantages that Dr. Shirley had put in place that helped us in our effort to become a more competitive program. In 1950, Wake established a summer debate workshop, the one that Jarrod referred to, for high school students. It served as an excellent recruiting vehicle for Wake debaters, and I suspect several of you in the room, like me, participated in this workshop. In 1957, Wake launched its high school tournament. Each year, hundreds of debaters and coaches traveled to Winston-Salem to participate in the Wake tournament. Seeing the Wake campus, even for a weekend, is an incredible marketing tool for this university. In 1969, Wake created the Debaters Research Guide, DRG, a research handbook for high school debaters. It was published each year with a focus on the new high school debate resolution. And my wife Susan says it was the DRG that made her first aware of Wake Forest University as a place to go to college. Now, the Department of Speech and Communication served as the campus sponsor and advocate of Wake debate in this era. They dedicated each year 2 or 3 graduate students that worked with us part-time to make us a successful debate program. They judged our practice rounds, they critiqued our arguments, they transported us to the tournaments, they served as judges for Wake Forest, and they became a valuable conduit for intelligence about what our rivals were arguing in other debates. We also benefited from the informal encouragement of Wake professor Dr. Michael Hahn, who I'm pleased is here this evening. For his many years of support, we thank him, and indeed, he ran the National Debate Forum for many years during this period of Wake debate history. So in this early 1970s period, the Wake debaters were eager to make this transition to national prominence. In 1970, Lauren Abernathy and John Cooper qualified for the NDT. Only 3 teams from Wake Forest had done so in the entire decade of the 1960s. In 1971, John Cooper and Keith Vaughn had a superb season and again qualified for the NDT. Then, for 5 consecutive years, 1973 to 77, Wake qualified for the NDT. Roger Solt, Kevin Quigley earned a first-round bid in 1976, and Todd Woodbury and Mary McLean set what I think is the Wake Forest University record in winning the Northwestern University tournament in 1976. Despite all this encouraging success, there was indeed a persistent flaw in the Wake Forest debate program of the 1970s: the lack of stable leadership. From 1967 to 1977, Wake Forest hired, count them, 3, and failed to retain, count them, 3 directors of debate. They were Merwin Hayes, Kenny Williams, and Fred McCutcheon. The leadership turnover took its toll on the lifeblood of any debate program: the inflow of new debaters into the program. The number of active debaters at Wake Forest declined every year from 1972 to 1977. When Allan arrived, we had only a handful of students involved in debate. In this era, the dean's office at Wake Forest began to take notice. They set the budget for the Wake Debate program every year. And Dean Mullen was concerned that too many dollars were expended on too few debaters, compared to other student activities at Wake Forest that were of much greater interest to students. So in the spring of 1977, Dr. Hazen urged me as a rising senior to speak personally with Dean Mullen about the value of debate to students and the value of debate to the university. Dean Mullen was a veteran administrator, a very savvy person, and he was close to Provost Glessner. I will never forget that conversation I had with him. Dean Mullen gave me my whole speech and listened carefully. I could tell by the end of it, he wasn't buying it. I think it's fair to say that at this point in Wake Forest debate history, the future of Wake debate was not entirely secure. Fortunately, Dean Mullen decided to give it one more try, hoping to find that new leadership that would provide a future for Wake debate. I was elated. In my dreams, I envisioned a new director coming from Northwestern, Harvard, University of Southern California. I guess I would settle for Kansas. Sorry, Dr. Hayes. A few months later, the campus announced that the new coach of Wake debate was Allan Louden. As a brash, unrealistic student, I had only questions about this appointment. Why had none of us ever heard of this guy? Why didn't he have a PhD? Why was Al's coaching experience at a community college in Wyoming not exactly the state of innovation and national policy debate? Despite my doubts, I kept my mouth shut, because my partner, Ross Smith, and I had a promising year ahead of us, and we wanted to debate. I was also the first Wake debater to meet Al, as I was tasked with transporting him from his hotel to the campus during his visit to Wake's summer workshop in 1977. In several words, I can describe my initial impressions of Al: earnest, enthusiastic, jovial, approachable, humble, and engaging. I recall thinking at the time, I don't know whether this guy is really going to work out, but he might be a really good recruiter at high school debaters. The speakers that follow me will provide a variety of rich perspectives about the Louden era. My impression is that Allan Louden proved to be the right person at the right time for Wake Forest University. He established his roots in the communications department. He built a trusted relationship with the campus administration. He reached out to the Wake Forest alumni, He hired a fabulous coaching staff, especially, of course, my former partner, Ross Smith, and he became a well-known leader in the national debate community. One way to measure the Louden era's impact is to compare the performance of Wake Forest debate at the national debate tournament in the 30 years before Allan arrived to the 30 years after Allan arrived. And if you were here this afternoon, you already heard Professor Louden tell you that these kinds of comparisons are worthless. And I disagree, of course. The pre-Louden, from 1947 to 1977, Wake Forest qualified for the NBT 18 times. From 1978 to 2008, Wake qualified 29 times. Consider one more telling comparison. The pre-Louden era saw one Wake Forest team in 1955 make the semifinals at the NBT. In the Louden era, 6 teams made the semifinals, and 2 of them brought home national championships. My time is short, so I will conclude with one more subjective thought for your reflection. When Allan arrived at Wake in the 1970s, the debaters had a dream of competing on a national stage. The Louden team saw this dream become reality, and we thank them for that. It is interesting that Wake Forest University as a whole experienced a similar transition, though a little bit after it occurred in debate. And that's why I say Allan Louden helped Wake Forest University become a national institution. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to it.
I can say that's why we're sitting loud in the hall. Okay, our second speaker is Dr. Nate French. Dr. French is an associate teaching professor in the Department of Communication and director of the Magnolia Scoutworks program at Wake Forest University. Nate and his wife Camille were members of the Wake Debate team, and after leaving Wake Debate, Dr. French earned a PhD in rhetoric from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. The debaters love to hear Dr. French tell the tales of Ross's coaching, including when Dr. French approached Ross after a particularly poor tournament, and Ross said the famous line, "Nate, debaters lose when the other team is either smarter or more prepared. And at Wake Forest, we always show up prepared." With that being said, please welcome to the stage.
A little bit more pause for that. Thank you to Allan for being so important to draw all of us together. I think that says a lot. It speaks a lot of the career. I'd also like to thank Jarrod for asking me to come and speak at this presentation. I really appreciate that invitation, Jarrod. And I have to thank my wife for making me do it because I almost didn't want to do it. So can I get a round of applause? So let me say, when Jarrod asked me for a couple of words about Louden, I thought it was going to be a few one-liners. That's what I was going for. But the assignment was about mentoring and my career. Oh my. Suddenly that was a much larger task because that takes place over going almost 35 years since I first took this class at age 19. The only thing from that time to this that I've never asked about is my hair. Other than that, I've engaged him on everything. So I have to flash back to 19 years old when I was trying to figure out what college was about, what I wanted to do with my life, and when Camille was starting to take my advances seriously. At that time, Camille and I shared an interest in law school, and going down the pre-law path Debate and argumentation was listed as a class. So I jumped into that class with Allan Louden. It was the first class meeting where Louden issued a challenge that would change my life. He said, if you join the Wake Forest debate team and go to 2 terms, you'll automatically get an A in the class. I felt like he was talking directly to me. This is like taking candy from a baby. How hard could debate be? I couldn't think of anything much easier. So I joined debate with a young man named Torrey Teamster and began my auspicious career with Wake Debate. It was the Dartmouth Novice B team that we hit first. They beat us to death. They beat us so bad that it still brings tears to my eyes just to think about it. They beat us so bad that looking through the window, Ross was out there shaking his head. I felt like we were embarrassing all the way through. And I honestly believe that we set a record in those 2 days. We won't show up in milestones, thank God. Please don't ever put us there. But we went 0-4 that first day and 0-4 that second day to be, I believe, the only team in Wake Forest history to go 0-8. But it was too late to drop the class, and after that, I truly fell in love with debate. I never got to be a better debater. I think I was a little bit better when I debated with Keith. I was a little bit better when I got to debate with him, but I never got to be that good, but I could hear the arguments, and I really fell in love with rhetoric. I declared double major with English, and Louden would become my master. Now, at some point, when Louden gets to speak, he'll say that I was late to his class from time to time. From time to time. But I loved his classes. Persuasion, debates, interpersonal, and rhetoric. I can even recall an argument over a paper. I wanted an A on the paper, and Louden said it's a B paper. I said, Louden, this is an A paper. He said it's a B paper. He said, do you want an A on the paper? I said, damn right I do. So he wrote an A on the paper. I was like, if you change it to gray, look, he's like, no. In my senior year, I had to make a choice. Was it going to be law school or was it going to be graduate school? And I can remember Louden saying, young man, what are you going to do good for the world if you go to law school? I said, good for the world. I didn't have an answer for that. And so grad school would end up being calm. Now Louden would not let me apply to Wake Forest. He wanted me to go away. He said, you need to go someplace else. He said, you should apply to the University of Montana and the University of Southern California. Those are 2 schools that you put on my list. Montana's sitting near Cuba with 4 white guys and 4 horses. Research that I could, I said, now there are 51 Black graduate students in the state. I'm not going to Montana. Next was going to be University of Southern California. I graduated in 1993, so this would have been in 1992. You guys don't remember what happened in 1992 was the Rodney King decision. There were riots in LA. The city was aflame, and I remember running out of the student apartments 103B, across Polo Road, down Friendship Circle, to see what Louden was talking about. Tell me something. And I go into Louden's house, and he's sitting there just as cool as the other side of the building. Nothing is wrong. I'm like, Louden, do you see this? He's like, man, this will pass. Louden, it's on fire. Everything is burning down. It's not a big deal. And he said, oh, I used to eat at that restaurant right there. I was like, oh, there are flames shooting out of the window. He still thought I should look at USC, but I didn't. I would end up going to Chapel Hill. So against his wishes, I went to Chapel Hill. And I also wasn't a huge fan of my return to Wake Forest and admissions or to move to multicultural affairs, both of which he thought meant I wouldn't finish my PhD. But I did go back to Chapel Hill. Then I left for a real job at Christopher Newport University, where I wanted to be a poor man's version of Louden. Wanted to be that professor that people would come and talk to. Wanted to be that person that can encourage you to do things that you hadn't even thought of. And I enjoyed my time at CNU, but all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I got a shot to come back to Jarrod Wake Forest. That was the first time that I actually stayed at Loudon's house. He said, you can stay here for the interview. And though I thought that that was my room, when I got up in the morning, I looked in the mirror, I had a golden retriever halo. Okay. Still, I got the job. As soon as I got to campus, Loudon pushed me to get in class, and a big no exploded from the dean's office. They gave me summer teaching, but Loudon kept on pushing. He pushed me right into what I thought was going to be the worst contract that I ever signed. Camille said, if you trust Loudon, go with it. He's never steered you wrong. And so I took it. It was a faculty appointment with a 1-1 teaching load for a total of $0. A total of $0 was the payment. And Loudon said, you should sign it. And I didn't think I should. This becomes the difference between having an advisor, someone who sees what you see and recommends a path, and having a mentor, someone who sees what you can't see and recommends a direction to go. It was that advice to sign that contract that would be the first step in my current role as associate teaching professor in communication. It would add to my role as the director of Magnolia Scholars. And we skipped through my wedding, 3 kids, all of them sat at Loudon's porch, the weeks when I borrowed his home while my house was being built, ups and downs, and even his attendance at my mom's funeral, which I still thank for. From hearing Loudon say, young man, to me, and hearing him say to me again, I saw your young man on campus today, referencing my eldest son, Cameron, who will graduate next year. I realized that I have to thank Loudon for helping this young man go to be a better man. Thank you for that. It was not one thing, not one moment, but a lifetime of memories, most of which I had to skip over here, but they're part of your legacy that I pass on to my students every day. In talking about me, Candace, Joe, and Janet once joked because I wasn't doing something exactly right. They said the spirit of Loudon is strong in this. Yes, it is. Thanks, man. Thanks.
Third speaker is Dr. Taylor Hahn. Dr. Taylor Hahn is the director of the Masters in Communication program at Johns Hopkins University, where he also serves as a senior lecturer. He is a proud WFU alum who earned his master's degree back in 2009. Following his time at Wake, he stayed continuing rhetoric, argumentation, and debate at the University of Pittsburgh, where he completed his doctoral work. All the while continuing to follow the advice and mentorship of Dr. Louden. He worked with Dr. Louden for 10 years at the Benjamin Franklin Transatlantic Fellows Institute, housed at Wake Forest University. And the two have co-authored multiple articles, book chapters on the Institute. Dr. Hahn has also co-authored a book on competitive policy debate, as well as several book chapters and journal articles on argumentation theory. Most recently, he co-authored an article with fellow BFTF staff alumnus, Dr. Nathan Bedsole, who also earned his master's in Wake Forest. Dr. Hahn currently resides in Maryland with his partner, Dr. Jade Olson. Welcome to the floor, Dr. Hahn.
Thank you, Jarrod. So today I was asked to speak a little bit about Dr. Louden's legacy in international debate with Ben Franklin Institute, as well as his predecessor, and his mentorship in general. And I'll admit, much like I was originally a little hesitant because how do you summarize all of those experiences and all those things that Dr. Louden's done? So I also realized it's a great honor, and I didn't want to miss their opportunity. And so I was thinking, how do you really capture the essence of what Dr. Louden has done in this area of his work? One way to think about this is through his extensive collaboration with debaters and argument scholars around the world. I personally had the pleasure of traveling and presenting with Allan at argument conferences in Qatar, Slovenia, and Bulgaria. While there, I've noticed quite commonly he had an observation that argument and debate often primes people to focus on their differences between speakers, cultures, beliefs, ideas, and so on. Yet, Dr. Louden has always succeeded in reminding people that at the end of the day, we're all just people. That when we engage one another authentically and view debate as a collaborative thought exercise, it tends to reveal far more points of commonality than we anticipated. It should be hard work, but it should also be fun. This lesson is itself noteworthy and could constitute the primary focus of my brief speech here tonight, but it's not going to. Instead, I want to focus on something that hits a bit closer to home and illuminates why I'm here talking about Dr. Loudon's extensive work. Keep in mind that my focal point is in addition to all the work he's done as a professor and as a focal point of weight debate. In 2008, Allan was smoking outside Harvard, and maybe not surprised. He casually asked me if I wanted to work at, quote, the Bend over the summer. I didn't have any plans for this summer, and I had a vague sense that it would be extremely foolish to turn down the opportunity. So I said yes, and then I frankly ran upstairs to my second floor carrel and figured out what the hell I had just signed up for. Here's what I learned over the next 11 years. The Benjamin Franklin Transatlantic Fellows Summer Institute for Youth, you see why we abbreviated it to the BEN, was founded in 2006. Though it built upon similar work that Louden had done at the Southeast European Youth League Institute, where it was seated. Again, you see why we abbreviated these things. At its core, the BFTF is a month-long experience where teenagers from across the United States and Europe come together to foster international cooperation, explore their role in civil society, and develop the skills necessary to be leaders in their own communities, nation, and the world. This work is supported and funded by the U.S. Department of State, and while originally housed at Wake Forest University, the BEN has also held institutes at George Mason University and Purdue University. Each summer, approximately 50 high school students from the US and Europe would come to Wake and would spend a month taking classes, working on projects, living in the dorms, and traveling with us to Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. Over the course of its tenure, the Ben Franklin Transatlantic Fellows Institute has housed over 1,000 fellows across those three universities. The Institute saw the same types of excitement and crisis that you'd expect of any organization over this period of time. This includes multiple unexpected surgeries, last-minute schedule changes, and the occasional emergency 3 a.m. meeting. We also experienced somewhat less common moments, including a near-fatal tire blowout in a minivan carrying the Institute staff. Thank you, Ron, for saving us there. And a harrowing half hour where we thought we had misplaced 40 passports. Full disclosure, that was my fault. So why am I focusing on these general experiences when I should be talking about Dr. Louden? Because the BEN was life-changing for many of our students and has led to many ongoing friendships among the staff. In a 24/7, month-long undertaking, it would have been so easy at many points to say, this is too much, we can't take it, I'm going home. If there ever was a moment like that, and they did happen, Allan was always there to guide and mentor students and staff alike. Yet, despite all this endless work, it was never about him. While the VA would disagree with me, the program lived or died by his guidance. Yet he always made sure that the experiences of the fellows and the staff were central to every moment and every decision that was being made. In a community of high school students, led by undergraduate and graduate mentors, he gave everyone the room to lead, learn, and grow, while also giving us a safety net if we needed it, which we often did. The Ben has fostered a number of friendships around the globe, multiple lawsuits in forms of new programs funded by the United States and the European Union, and an endless sea of fond memories. For the academics among us, it's also resulted in multiple journal articles, reunions under the camouflage and conference presentations, and a book. Every time I've collaborated with Dr. Louden, there's been a lot of work involved. But here's the trick. It is always fun. And I think that's the true legacy of the BFTF and of debate in general with Dr. Louden. He makes what seems to be a monumental task an enjoyable one, and one that you want to do over and over again. Every year at the Ben Franklin Institute, I would leave at the end of July exhausted. And every year on August 1st, I was eager to come back again as soon as possible. This is the same reason why people associated with debate end up teaching debate or running their own programs. It's why I work at the debate at Ben Franklin every year. The Ben, for all of its long nights and headaches, personally remains one of the most fulfilling experiences in my professional life, and certainly one of the most fun. Fun is an important takeaway for my speech, but I want to leave you with what I think is a larger legacy of Dr. Louden's work, and I think it hits home on a bit of a larger scale. The BFTF alumni have a Facebook page where they occasionally will post updates, some of these personal, some are professional. It's always been active, but never more so than it has been this year. A surprise to no one, but on February 24th, Russia began an invasion of Ukraine, two nations that were frequently represented at the BFTF. In real time, as events were unfolding, alumni began posting with one another. It would have been easy to point fingers, to call out various histories of aggression and reciprocal aggression, or blame the average citizen for their country's actions. But none of that became the focal point of conversation. In the exchanges over the past 3 months, there have been two primary questions that have been seen among the alumni. How can I help? And how can we better understand what is happening? Alumni and their families have opened their homes to people displaced during the conflict. Messages of support, information sharing, and details on humanitarian efforts have become central themes among the Ben Franklin alumni. Most noteworthy for me have been the positive and supportive exchanges between many of the alumni from Ukraine and Russia. The alumni network represents BFTF fellows for over a decade, and some of these people have never met in person. Yet they all carry Dr. Louden's legacy of empathy, openness, and a willingness to work together and to understand, even when it's hard, and even when it's not hard. And we're looking for a legacy. I think that's pretty damn good. Thank you.
Fourth speaker is Dr. Jarrod Winkler. Dr. Winkler is the lead faculty member of the Transcultural Conflict and Violence Initiative and professor of communication at Georgia State University. Her research focuses on communication and conflict, with a particular emphasis on presidential foreign policy rhetoric, argumentation and debate, visual communication, and online extremism. Her book, In the Name of Terrorism, won the Outstanding Book Award in Political Communication from the National Communication Association. She also won the National Communication Association's Visual Communication Commission's Award for excellence in research for her work on linkages between visual images and ideology. The Strategic Studies Institute of the Army War College published her most recent co-edited volume, Visual Propaganda and Online Extremism. And Rutledge will be publishing her most recent volume, Networking Argument, later this year. The U.S. Department of Justice and the Air Force Office of Scientific Research and various private foundations, have funded her research into various aspects of conflict and solutions. Dr. Winkler holds a PhD in public communication from the University of Maryland. She also earned a master's degree in speech communication from Wake Forest University and a BA in English and speech communication from the University of North Carolina. She's the past president of the American Forensic Association. Dr. Winkler.
if an upper administrator was taking a look at a curriculum data, which is a lot of what they do, and they picked up Allan Louden's data, they would be quite pleased. He's had millions of dollars of federal funding from the State Department, something that always pleases administrators. He has edited 9 volumes, dozens of articles, journal articles and chapters, and he wins a national award, yeah, and another one, and another one, and another one. That's the kind of thing that they're very excited about, and the notion that he could do that while producing one of the largest and one of the most competitive debate teams in the United States is truly remarkable. But I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm supposed to talk about his publications next. What I am going to talk about is the theme that I see through his entire curriculum year. And that is that every single thing that Allan has done in his professional life is to impact other people. And so that's what I want to focus on when I take a look at what he says. I want to go back for a minute. Let me to illustrate what I'm saying. Let me go back to some of these publications. John already mentioned the fact that we had the debaters research guide, the DIRGE as it's called. That's a crazy thing where you get the topic on April and by June you're supposed to have an entire volume that has thousands of pieces of quotations from all kinds of interdisciplinary research, and you've got to put it into a form that high school students can understand. I will tell you that by the time I got here, John gave you the beginning of it, by the time my generation was taking a look at that, it was the gold standard, and you could not compete nationally unless you were familiar with the arguments that were in the DIRGE, just pure and simple. That, to me, is not the biggest legacy of what we ought to take from the DIRGE. And that is, there were a lot of high school students who didn't have access to a college library. They didn't have access to be able to get the evidence to even be able to have a chance to compete. Maybe it's because I grew up in the mountains in North Carolina in a place where it snowed a lot, so it's even hard to get out of the house, much less to get to a library. But I can tell you, if the DIRGE hadn't been there, that would have made a major difference in terms of my desire to go on and want to debate. And I know it did for thousands of students that were across the United States. He also got high school students to focus on topics like arms sales, education, consumer safety, energy, and foreign policy. And as any high school teacher can tell you, or anyone anywhere else, that is not an easy thing to do. But he pulled it off, and it's truly remarkable. The second thing I want to talk about his publications in this regard is what he did with his students. Because Allan's always correct. And one of the things he did was he put together an archive of political advertisements that he used in his classes. The students also contributed to political advertisements. Now, I worked with some people that were pretty well known for doing political advertising. And I will tell you that the difference between Allan Louden and the people I was working with is Allan put his advertisements online. Anybody could use it. Any teacher could use it. Any student could do it. That was the difference in terms of having the outreach that's going to continue as a sport. Another experience he had with the students was to do Wake in Washington. And if you don't know about that program, that is a summer field school, if you will, in Washington, D.C. And Allan knows so many people in Washington, D.C. at this point, half of them, alums, but nevertheless, a whole lot of people that exist there that are extremely important. And his students got to interact with those students. Now, a lot of students in the world don't have the opportunity to come to a place like Wake Forest, much less get into a summer field school where they get to engage with the top people that are in Washington, D.C. So what did Allan do? He had his students write journals and put their reflections down about the experiences they had when they did it. So when you read that volume and it will describe what those experiences are like. So those that don't have the opportunities get to experience it vicariously. They get to imagine themselves in something that important they get to dream what they can become. And as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty important stuff. As far as the field itself and how its publications contributed to that, I guess the thing I want to talk about is the fact that, in my mind, Allan's basically the canary in the coal mine. Decades ago, he told us that we ought to be paying attention to what was going on in state politics, when I assure you, our field could care less. We were only interested in national politics because that's where the action was. I think if you take the actions of the last couple of weeks, or if you live in the state of Georgia the last few years, I will tell you that state politics have become extremely important, and had we listened to Allan at that point, the field would be much better off. One of the things that a lot of academics do, and certainly a criticism of academia, is that a lot of us stay in our ivory tower. We speak to what we want to talk about, and that's it. We speak to the people, the really small group of people that want to study exactly the same thing that we do, and we don't get past that to be able to share what we've learned, share what we're thinking about, and engage people so we can think better by going outside. Allan just kind of blew the lid off of that before it became vogue to be a public scholar, which is now the word we use for get your work out in the field so people can understand that you're actually doing something about it. What Allan did was do more than 1,000 interviews with media. And there's no question that Allan was, in high demand by the top media outlets in the field. So, whether it's the Congressional Quarterly, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, USA Today, AP, Fox, CNN, BBC Newsweek, Voice of America, Political.com, Huffington Post. I could go on and on with those. But the point is, those national outlets certainly want to hear what he had to say. But the interesting thing when you look at Allan's video is that he did more work working in the cities that didn't have the media that made it into the top 10. Those people got his views too. He went to rural areas where probably, my guess is that the media reach was probably more like dozens rather than millions. He went to conservative outlets and he went to liberal outlets. He went to literally media outlets that were getting on their feet and ones that were long-standing. And the fact that he spread himself, everybody in North Carolina knows, you see all the media interviews he's done here. I truly believe that there is a citizen in North Carolina that does not know Allan Louden, I would be surprised. But it's more than that. It is in so many states that it is truly spectacular what he's been able to deliver literally across the nation. And if that wasn't enough, he did his media interviews internationally as well. And in countries like England, France, Canada, Bulgaria, I'm missing some, Lithuania, Ukraine, I could go on and on, but you get the gist. The point is, everybody wants to know what Allan has to say. And I think there's a lot of academics at this point that wish that they had the ability to attract that much attention and have that many people want to know what he said. But I think there are very few, even the ones that are trying desperately to make that happen, that could say that they have the range of media outlets that Allan has engaged with. And so as a result, the range of people that Allan has been able to engage with and tell us what he thinks. Allan doesn't stop by telling you his opinions on what he thinks. He loves interactions, and he is interested not only in what the public thinks, but a lot of his professional career has been focused on the next generation of leaders. And so he's done a lot of political consulting as well. And if you're not aware of what he does in this regard, he's worked for gubernatorial candidates, for senatorial candidates, and for presidential candidates. But again, it's just like everything everything else that Allan does. He doesn't just work with the top, the people that are running for the president of the United States. They did that too. What he also did was he worked at the Institute for the Public Trust. And that is for people that are trying to get into politics. They think they've got some good ideas, but they can't begin to navigate the political labyrinth that is the whatever political communication today. And so that's what that group does. And he's been giving speeches at that venue for a very, very long time. I want to piggyback just for a second, because as you can tell, that gets the leaders that are in the United States, but it's pretty clear that he is deeply interested in the leaders that are going to come from around the world. And our last speaker talked to you about the Ben Franklin Awards. I will simply say that I was stunned. And if you have not looked at the website for the Ben Franklin program, you really should take a moment to do that. Because Allan's program has trained leaders, and I haven't done a debate speed drill in a while, so I'll be a little slow on this, but here's the countries. Albania, Armenia, Austria, Belarus, Belgium, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Kosovo, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Macedonia, Malta, Moldova, Montenegro, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Russia, Serbia, the Slovak Republic, Slovenia, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Take everything that last speaker said about how important that experience was, and then you tell me who is the person that is training leaders in all those countries. That's what Allan's been doing with his work. Now, the way I'll close and keep it all together for you is, as I've told these stories, I suspect there were a lot of names that came to your mind as I was going through these. You probably thought about Roger Soul when I was talking about the dirge. You probably thought about Alessandra Beasley, about Juan Van Berg, and apparently a lot of other people in this room when I was talking about the Ben Franklin Awards. You certainly were thinking about Ross Smith, and you were thinking about Jarrod Atchison when I was talking about the debate team. The point is, the way I would describe Allan's professional career is to say that he's the most generous academic I know. And the thing I can end with is a prediction. I don't think generous souls ever burn out. And so he may be retiring today. Okay, rock on Allan. But I also know that if you're that generous, you can't get rid of it. So I think we can all expect that there'll be another idea. And I also know that we will be seeing the impact of what his professional career has been for years and years to come.
Our fifth speaker is Allan Coverstone. Allan is an educator, leader, and consultant who has worked for over 30 years to advance educational equity and catalyze change in K-12 and higher education through professional roles in educator preparation, charter school innovation, grant making, and school improvement. Allan partners with educational communities to drive practical and meaningful outcomes for students of color and for those experiencing poverty. Allan sees intentional, transformational change efforts by building trusting relationships and placing those most connected to the outcomes at the center of decision-making. Prior to launching Covariant Education, where he's now the principal consultant, Allan served as a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and multiple faculty and program leadership roles in the College of Education at Belmont University, as an innovative leader for the Metropolitan National Public Schools, and as a board member. A proponent of learning grounded in student experiences that cultivate their personal voice and agency, Dr. Coverstone earned his ED in Educational Leadership and Policy at Vanderbilt's Peabody School and his undergraduate degree in Speech Communication at Wake Forest University. He was a teacher and debate coach for 14 years and now also serves on the board of the National Speech and Debate Association. Dr. Coverstone.
Humbled and honored to be here and just hoping to do my best. I want to begin by stipulating what I think has come through from the speakers this evening. Dr. Allan Louden is the central figure in the last 50 years of Wake Forest communication and debate. And his retirement from this community will leave a void. But his life's work already lives on in everything that each of the people in this room and countless others beyond do for and with each other every single day. Now, I actually read cards cut by Allan Louden in a competitive debate. I wonder how many others of us have it. Sure. Okay. Making blocks was not exactly Al's love language, although giving us what we thought we needed always was. I suspect that was the reason for those blocks that day. I'll be happy to regale you later with the war story of our debate and Bradley fighting via phone and cards that Louden cut for us later this evening, if you'd like, fair warning. But that's not really the point here. Thinking about the cards that Louden cut for us got me wondering, what cards could I cut written by Dr. Louden? Dr. Louden was never one to speak publicly about what he was trying to do, at least not around me. And, God forbid that he celebrates something that he had done himself. He's always about what we're doing, what we've done. And I wondered what his scholarship and writing might tell us about his life's work. So rereading Dr. Louden's papers and articles has led me to one inescapable conclusion, and this is my first observation. Allan Louden has played the genuine educator's long game and has shaped a generation of thinkers, practitioners, citizens, family members, colleagues, and friends that he probably doesn't even realize fully, let alone acknowledge, because for Al, it's never been about Al. To illustrate this conclusion, I turn to a traditional format recognizable to many in this room and built around cards cut from articles and essays that Dr. Louden has written. Jarrod, you can start the timer now. Allan Louden is an educator, and he believes that what matters in his work are the opportunities that he can create for students to learn and grow. And his approach has been consistent since at least 1971. His philosophy is built on radical inclusion of student voices and agency, no matter where that leads. And from my experience in K-12 education, I can say it's actually pretty rare to find ideas of student-centeredness, while popular to talk about, actually showing up in practice. And educators who truly center students face accountability pressures that push them in another direction. No doubt, Dr. Louden has felt pressure during his career that's led him to question his commitment from time to time to putting authentic student learning experiences first, especially when we've made embarrassing mistakes that he's been left to explain. Nevertheless, I can detect no occasion when his essential commitment to the next generation and his belief that we can learn from our experiences together has ever wavered. As a result, Dr. Louden is responsible for the conditions and contributions that have prepared countless numbers of people in our generation and the next generation and the one after that to build community, to understand each other's perspectives, to discuss and debate with clear-eyed reality, and ultimately construct the world that we will live in together. So observation one, Dr. Allan Louden's work and influence have changed the world for the better. This observation proceeds in two parts. A, his philosophy. Dr. Louden's philosophy is focused on student growth and grounded in radical otherness. First, his philosophy shines through in his role as a debate coach. As Louden wrote in 1980, we would be hard-pressed to find a coach who does not subscribe to general humanistic goals in this work. Most coaches would not have gone into education or have expended the considerable time and effort the activity requires without the sense that their students would become better people as a result. Although many of us might not be as hard-pressed as Dr. Louden to think of counterexamples, this card illustrates something that is uniquely Louden, and that is speaking things into existence. Here, Louden is calling for others to adopt this student-centered perspective on coaching debate in the hyper-competitive milieu of the dawn of
in the 1980s. And he says that every coach has this perspective because that's the world he wants to live in. And saying it has rhetorical value in causing people who might act differently to recall and recover motivations that they may have had and lost, and which Louden can call forward, making us all better without anyone realizing that he was even responsible for it. Number two, his philosophy shines in his role as an astute observer of political communication. Dr. Louden was a very early observer of the ways that issues and images used in political communication and wrote in 2004 about the idea of authenticity, foreshadowing much that's become very visible in our political communication in our age of confirmation bias enclaves that celebrate a candidate's authenticity and realness, even when that authenticity is built on unsavory politics or images. In fact, if you listen closely in 2004, Dr. Louden predicts people's reaction to a candidate like Trump, but many of us may have missed it because uncovering the phenomenon in the mind and person of Bill Clinton wasn't as interesting. But he understood that Bill Clinton demonstrated, and subsequent politicians as well, that even being known to be duplicitous was somehow still popular because people didn't have a trustworthy image, but they had an authentic image based on admitting their flaws and being who they are. Here's Louden in 2004. We believe there is potential to appreciate some of the anomalies that populate every election cycle. The direct solicitation of the voters' assessment of candidate authenticity directs us to thinking of instances in which candidates are evaluated negatively via traditional measures, but still command elections. Inquiries might include, can candidates be viewed as less than honest and yet trustworthy? How does sincerity interact with approval? How do the factors intersect with issues, such that we reject their ideas but embrace the person, and vice versa? Inquiries extending image to an authenticity frame would ask more than knowledge of a candidate's biography, policy positions, and affective response. Versions of how real the candidate is would become a focal inquiry. Number three, this philosophy shows when he reflectively uncovers hidden structures operating in interscholastic debates. Here I'll use Ross's favorite technique of summarizing the card. But as far back as in 1971, he studied judge decisions at the Big Sky Championships and noted ways that so-called professional judges and non-professional judges differed in their approaches. And he identified and centered their differences not in levels of competence, but in their levels of confidence. And in the process, uncovered conventional wisdom and its impact on our practice, which often is a factor that serves to diminish or exclude. 4. This philosophy shines when he, writing with others, champions the critical thinking skills that participation in debate generates in a detailed 1997 study advocating the opportunity and even inclusion of debate pedagogy in departmental classes in addition to the extracurricular settings. Number 5, of course, his consistent dedication to youth empowerment through technology and youth communication is well known and has been mentioned here. And I submit the Ben Franklin program as the logical application of his unwavering student-centered philosophy and his approach to the present day. With others, he wrote in 2012, what is needed then is a concentrated pedagogy, capable of harnessing native digital competencies toward enhancing deliberation. The various pedagogical strategies that we have shared here could, with some adaptation, be integrated into secondary and post-secondary curriculum. Creative renovations of, say, public speaking, argument, or civics classes could orient students' rhetorical production, not just toward the immediate embodied audiences present in the classroom, but the wider networked audiences accessible through the digital media. We need that more than ever in K-12 education and beyond. Number 6, as a campus force and influence, whether through his efforts to advance innovative student opportunities connected to hosting presidential debates measured in the countless master's theses he's influenced both directly and indirectly. Dr. Loudon's perspectives and approach shine through because no one who knows and works with Dr. Louden leaves without deeply imbibing his openness, communication, community, and mutual understanding. So building on the clear and consistent philosophy outlined above brings me to E. He did what he set out to do. Here, in Dr. Loudon's own words from his earliest years at Wake Forest, each of us will recognize plainly his impact on our experiences. 1, Dr. Loudon's program and his classes
He tolerates risks, even those of losses, for the greater educational good of the students. Louden writes in 1980, in the heat of the tournament or daily interaction, the repression of ideas is sometimes easier than encouragement of creativity. There's a difference between saying, run this argument, or ask this question, and discussion of ideas with debaters. Mutual interchange should aid student growth, but the ultimate responsibility should remain with the speakers. This independence of choice might even demand that on occasion, mistakes might be made and rounds lost, but whose capacity for original thought is the activity trying to encourage. If a debater cannot respond without blocks or write an affirmative case, the activity is failed in a fundamental humanistic pledge to the individual. Are we to wait until graduation to expect the miracle of critical thinking to take place? Secondly, the ethical center of Dr. Louden's approach is measured by the quality of our dialogue. Fairness lies in how the exchange affects the substance of our discussion. Louden writes again, my perspective also suggests that the coach encouraged fairness when dealing with the opposition. Although the activity is highly competitive, the use of tricks artificially diminishes the capacity of others. When such maneuvers leave us at the level of trading ignorance, they fail to promote the exchange and thus diminish both parties. Third, Dr. Louden's approach values our opponents and sharing ideas. He writes again, focusing on the individual suggests additional approaches the coach might employ. For example, educational responsibilities would not stop at the edge of campus. Assisting the participants from either one's own or an opponent's university would be equally justified. Suppressing information, be it ideas, cases, or evidence, would act to limit or censor human intelligence. And many of you who are younger than I don't recall that that was not the norm when that was written. Fourth, all deeps will recognize that Dr. Louden has a deep commitment to the squad above all else. He wrote in 1980, the ability to experience thinking and choice seems fundamentally tied to the locus of everyday decision-making in the squad. Decentralizing the decision-making process offers a number of advantages to a forensic program as well as to the individuals involved. And while it is probably true that the buck must stop somewhere, it certainly does not follow that the buck has to start at the top. The decisions that are made directly affect the lives and happiness of the squad members. Since each person adds a unique perspective to the outcomes of any decision, their input is added. Dr. Louden's approach is intentional. It wasn't passive, it wasn't accidental, though that's what he'd lead you to believe if you ask him about it. Louden wrote in 1980, it can be argued that approaching coaching from this humanistic perspective is an abdication of the director's responsibilities. The approach, rather than being passive, would tend to stir up more creativity, innovation, and change. Diffusing responsibility does not suggest less involvement. Quite the opposite is the case. The focus on the individual and the individual's development as the measure of success and value should prompt even greater efforts on the part of the coach. And I know we would all recognize from our own experiences Dr. Louden's deep belief that relationships with each individual student are key. Dr. Louden wrote, the relationship between the coach and each individual student is just that, a separate and unique relationship. When the people become interchangeable, the focus is non-humanistic. Like any object which can be substituted one for another, responding to a debater in this manner ignores the very essence of uniqueness, which gives meaning to each individual. A sensitive relationship between the coach and the student would recognize this essential individual construct. The only logical conclusion from this research presented to you today is that Dr. Louden did what he set out to do. He concludes, the coach who approaches responsibilities from a humanistic perspective can offer the student far more than just knowledge of the skills involved. An atmosphere can be created which is person-centered, drawing on the vast resources that each individual brings to the activity. The emphasis can be a process-oriented learning room, where much of the responsibility for the success lies with the participants. The program can be one where the direction is self-initiated and the whole person is invested in the process. Allan Louden launched his career with a strong belief in students and future generations. He never tried to be the sage on the stage with us, showing his considerable wisdom directly to us. Instead, he held to the belief that we learn more and better when we're all learning together, interpreting our experiences and sharing our ideas in collaborative community. This approach is actually unlikely to earn an educator the incredible accolades and recognitions that they richly deserve. What it is likely to do is produce countless numbers of people who are better for the approach he employed. Better because they understand nuance and subtlety. Better because they appreciate others and difference. Better because they value inclusion and understanding, and better because they build community and connections. I know firsthand how badly we need this approach to be the norm in K-12 and post-secondary education. I know personally how deeply it's made a difference in my life. And I'm sure that we all see how deeply the American community at large needs this approach much more broadly. It's more important now than ever that we heed Dr. Louden's call to action and make even more progress in expanding opportunity for all students to learn this way, inclusive of both competitive communication opportunities, public-facing presentational opportunities, and classroom instruction organized around the student whose thought and engagement fosters meaningful communication on tough issues, even when those issues carry risks. Learning is risky, and those who take those risks for students are seldom celebrated as they do. Allan Louden is that kind of educator, and tonight we raise a glass to acknowledge each in his own way, each in our own way, that we would not be here today without his having borne those risks for us. And while he may not be all that comfortable with our shining the light of his work in this way, it's right for us to pause and do that. Before we get back to the work that his career has also prepared us all to do, living out Dr. Louden's selfless respect for others and individual free thought in communities of collaboration, made possible by open and honest communication, deliberation, and debate, in the spirit of pro-humanity. May it be so. Thank you, Dr. Louden.
Okay, everybody, Glacier's on the move. Dr. Louden is going to be going right after I am. So I have to invoke two speaker privileges. Number one, I wrote the 2 pages knowing that we would be running maybe a little short on time, printed them and stuck them in the front of your book. So I had a little chance to give you some printed words. Number two, I have the privilege of seeing Dr. Louden on a daily basis. So while as much as I want to give an opportunity to communicate to him his impact on my life, I do feel like I have an opportunity to do that over the deck with him as we continue to work on the books and the project. So my message is less to Dr. Louden and more to you. In 1992, I was an 8th grader in the public school system in Louisiana. If you are not an athletic 8th grader in the public school system in Louisiana, your social capital is not that impressive. My parents saw me floundering and said you needed to do debate. And my mother had been a debate coach and sent me to the Winkler summer debate workshop, which on the one hand was an amazing experience. That after leaving that workshop, as John Graham mentioned, I only thought of higher education in the terms of what it compared to Wake Forest. But it was also pretty intimidating. I interacted with characters like Bill Shanahan and Ross Smith, people who were in no way, shape, or form changing the level of their engagement or argument because I was an 8th grader from the public school system in Louisiana. But standing out front of Carswell Hall was Dr. Louden. And I have never called him Allan. I've only ever called him Dr. Louden. As a student, as a graduate student, high school, all the way through as a college. And he's never corrected me. And that, in my sense, is something that I think highlights the fact that Dr. Louden has always held for me a position of prestige that extends beyond whatever metaphor I might try to assert, familiar or otherwise. Dr. Louden is the reason I'm standing here today. I can say that sentence for now until eternity, and it wouldn't capture the depths of what he has done to make my life possible. Dr. Louden was the person who convinced my parents that my dream of coming to Wake Forest University was worth it. Dr. Louden was the person who convinced me that graduate school was worth it, that it was worth it to be a director of debate, and fundamentally, that it was worth it to come back to Wake Forest to try to follow the legacy of Ross Smith and Allan Louden, which is a seemingly impossible task on a daily basis. So 3 myths of Allan Louden, who I will refer to as Dr. Louden, that I want to share with you. Myth number 1, that he has a happy gene. That's the language that comes from my colleague, Dr. Michael Hyde, who's over here, who says that you'll never find Allan Louden, Dr. Louden angry, but that's a myth. It's a myth in the best sense of the term. Because those of you all who know Dr. Louden know, he gets upset when a student is being treated the wrong way. That's the moment when you get a different version of Dr. Louden. When a student, there have been countless examples with debaters, but even non-debaters, when the administration sends an email that says, sorry, this deadline's passed, you're done. It's Dr. Louden who says that's not right. And that becomes his phrase, that's not right. There is a version of Dr. Louden that is not always happy, but it's inevitably when it's connected to helping a student navigate the bureaucracy because something is happening that's not right. So that may be somewhat true because we do see him as happy and jovial, but I can tell you, you would not want to be the dean of students on the other side of the table when Dr. Louden thinks the student's been treated the wrong way. Myth number two, that Dr. Louden was a director, but less of a coach. And this is something that I think is oftentimes described by the debaters for me, where they see me as the person that helps make the tickets run. I get to sign, we're getting close. But the truth of the matter is, anyone who wanted to be better at cross-examination went to Dr. Louden's office. And Ross used to be the one to push people to Dr. Louden and say, you're not losing debates because you don't have the evidence. Speech. You couldn't convince someone to pull their mom from a burning truck. We need to go talk to Allan Louden. And so Dr. Louden was a phenomenal debate coach, not just director, an actual debate coach. Thank you so much. Myth number three is that Dr. Loudon's a bad driver. He is a bad driver. That's not a myth. But the reason that he's a bad driver is because he cares so much about the conversation with whoever else is in the car with him, he can't take his eyes off of them. There were many times in DC, our 15-passenger vans would veer a tiny bit enough to nick a car on the way, and someone would say, did we just hit a car? And Dr. Louden smoking would say, I'm not sure, but let's keep going in the conversation. So that's not a myth, he's not a great driver, but it's because he's so engaged with it. What I want to leave you with is this sense of, I think, a unique argument for what Dr. Louden taught me about anyone who decides that they want to be a director, a debate, a professor, or anything else along those lines. He has great catchphrases, people grow up in spite of themselves, Jarrod learned what plausible deniability means. He has catchphrases that he uses. But there's a truth in that he told me once that there were less than 5 days, he said I can count them on one hand, that I didn't want to come to the office. And for some people, they might think that that's the old adage, find a job that you love and it won't be a job. That's not it. Dr. Louden lives in a state of appreciation. Every conversation he has, you feel he appreciates it. Every time he comes to work, he appreciates it. And it's infectious, so that even when the horrible things happen in life, the tragedies that have happened at big debates that have taken place, Dr. Louden is the first to say it's texture and it hurts for the right reasons. And those phrases are an essential part of understanding that he lives in a state of appreciation. So I'm going to close by saying how much I, all the people at Big Debate, and on behalf of Dr. Louden, appreciate you coming this evening and being a part of this amazing adventure with Dr. Louden. And with that being said, I turn it over to the man of the hour, Dr. Allan Louden.
Group of speakers to everybody with gratitude. I've walked the halls of this place, this institution, for 4.5 decades. For hundreds of days across scores of years, Wake Forest has permeated my very identity. was a surveyor as a little chew. And yet every day brought surprise. I can count on my fingers. This is a Jarrod stole slide, and perhaps my toes as well now, actually. The number of days I did not want to have to work. I often counsel students to follow their heart and find a career which supply reason. For me, there was never a doubt. I have made it a practice to remember for a moment each day to be appreciative of living this blessed life. In a few weeks, especially as we approach this event, I've heard from hundreds of former players over that 50 years from every era, from friends around the globe. All this attention feels more than a little ostentatious, actually, marginally embarrassing, but also filled with love and memories. I cannot imagine how anybody could feel any more affirmed. A genuine thanks to all those folks and yourselves. I'm amazed and amused by our surroundings here because we notice that we're in the Louden court. Although this one spelled W, which I think is code for this particular one, a hell of a lot more money. And we're in the Ben Sutton building. Ben was one of my very first students at Wake, along with Cameron and Jimmy and some others who were in the room in those very first year. And they're here. Ben wanted to come. We stayed in touch over the years. He would have been here except as his daughter. He's marrying off in South Carolina. And I guess there are priorities. And beautiful venue. Becca, Eden, Atchison, internationally known. Of course, we can put together some pretty nice flowers. It's just amazing. I called Jarrod last night and details, and Jarrod, of course, was over here, bringing up all these bouquets, carrying out, doing the hard labor and the hard work. Before sharing some observations, let me acknowledge some colleagues and friends. Certainly the folks here are also those who would have liked to have attended the lunch. The biggest real life happens group were those who some of the regrets because they basically had kids, which made sense to me more their academics finishing the term. Let me say a few words about the department. Communication has been my adult home. Populated from beginning to end by thoughtful and competent friends. I am blessed to have been in a department that's never known disintegration. There were, of course, irritating praise, bats maybe, but the caring and camaraderie always prevailed. There is also a bevy of current important graduate students here tonight. They enrich and energize with innovation. Each person is special, and while this is not the time to call out the old, you've been sitting there long enough, I understand. I still think there will be time later or tonight for the province at least. The room is also full of undergrads, former and current, who are the ones who largely bring the excitement with academic adventure, which is pretty amazing. There are a couple of tables here that are inclusive, I think, of all the communication admins since our days in Carswell Hall. Deborah and Beth and Linda and Kimberly and Paula and Candace and Janice, who was to be here, they all returned. Well, that means a lot. To me, that says something. And we also remember the deep reverence Patty Lanier. Patty's husband said that other engagements couldn't get here. Sent his regards and was here in spirit. Thanks to Steve Jowler and 15 minutes. I missed the didn't catch up. Who is our
our chair, who's made a lot to do with this happening. And I like him, that's very nice. I like his much for his warm and caring nature. And of course, to Candace and Janice, who without doing nothing for that. And to Joe, the loving human. I also want to introduce my sister Ann and my brother-in-law Terry, who are busy that. If you get a chance to meet them, if you do it, if you can. They're really good folks. I share this day with two others in my department who are retired. Their absence will reduce the community's identity in important ways, even as the community grows and feels them behind. Michael J. Hyde, where he sitting there. Michael J. Hyde, I said, stand up, but you look pretty comfortable. Michael J. Hyde is our most famous faculty member. Who is competence, who is giving an intellectual contribution to our discipline and our singular. Michael is something of a self-knowledge curmudgeon, but those who truly know him, it is more accurate to classify Michael and in the caring take care class. Thank you. Devastating. That in our department, who had the poison. Maybe if you wait that long, still listening to us tonight. She's competent and smart enough to have done most of our jobs better than we do. Janet uniquely is engaged in the world in ways most of us will hope and envy. She's done so much. We have first became friends and she and her husband Peter. We're host families for the Ben Franklin program. For well over a decade. An amazing sort of thanks to Janice. I feel like we're relieved because I don't sit there doing it long. You're still sitting there and I can stand up. This is the part I think where you're supposed to reflect and share the life lessons that you learned across this 45 years. I don't have any. I am also now working ambitiously toward my 75th birthday, a chronology where one might hope some wisdom existed. I'm old enough, however, to understand that my Wake Forest time did not provide a convenient set of lessons learned. Rather, there were a broad spectrum of insights and appreciations that mattered. And they are, as they should be, as diverse as the people in this room. Let me share a short story how I got into this kind of fun. Despite our human tendencies to take credit for how our lives unfold, the truth of the matter really is that for all of us, serendipity counts through most of life's choices. I'm assured that each of your wake discoveries involved considerable chance. The farm kid in Montana who looked at the colleges did not even know Wake Forest existed. And during much of my early years at Wake, I found the Montana offshucks strategy worked very well to my advantage. Later, happily teaching at a Wyoming Community College in a town where the elevation easily exceeded the population. I knew there would come a juncture at which it was time to roll the dice. So it was more by chance than destiny, actually. And traveling to a national convention in San Francisco, waiting for connection flight in Denver, I struck up a conversation with another waiting young professor, Michael David Hazen. As I recall, we talked about building the Wake programs. He informed me that Wake Forest name, which at that point sounded pretty exotic to me, actually. Had an interim debate position. I applied, and months later, I was invited for an interview. I packed the trailer, drove 3,000 miles across the country to an unknown destiny with a 1-year contract. Jarrod likes to tell a story that the then Dean Tom Lowen, lovely man, told me that the university was seriously considering moving away with a bank. He did say they could not find a long-term director. Jarrod's version, which is admittedly more exciting than the truth or mine, the dean said in Jarrod's version, "Do not buy a house, do not get too comfortable." I do not remember Dean Lowen saying, in effect, keep your bags packed. But I was comfortable in short order, and I did buy a house. What I remember as true, at the time, there was never a thought of moving on, always an assumption that it would work out. The 5 years were, we had 5 year-to-year contracts. I never felt in peril. By this point, Dean Lowen had become a steadfast friend of the program, supported in many ways. The university never said, "Time is up," and instead authorized what became a 3-year leave of absence, believe it or not, to go to USC and complete a PhD. As they say, the rest is history. I had 2 Wake Forest lives. First 30 years, we were teaching at the store, but on rare occasions, we actually had like 5 classes a semester, because there wasn't enough of us to go around. And hitting the road pretty much every other weekend, and sometimes more often, with a van full of debaters heading to the next term. Those were heady days, filled with much excitement and fun, and friends, and exhaustion. For the first 3 decades, my world was largely external to the Wake Forest intrigue. The last 15 years, my Wake Forest is more traditional and internal. I have had the pleasure of serving as director of graduate studies, department chair, 2 jobs I didn't seek. I think you're supposed to say, I did on occasion, how dismal those jobs are. But for me at least, that was just not the case. I especially enjoyed being chair. Driving in the morning, not going to hit the fan that day. And every day you do something that facilitated others. Art. I wanted to, without elaboration, share some moments in 45 years, many of which involve people in this room. That's why I mentioned that quickly. I think moments like having dinner at the base of the Parthenon in Athens, the jury, Ben Franklin Fellow running from the Justin upon arrival at the Berlin airport, with Ben Franklin Reed or Kabul, an original fellow who picked me up and paid me part of the train in Kiel, Germany. The Ben Franklin was truly transformative, making all of us involved world citizens. Alessandro, Ron, Tay, Scott, Carol, others, mentors in the room, created the enchantment. The representatives of Moments That Matter, there's one feeling that I was interviewed many times in WX that night by Winkler County who's right here as a former student and now an accomplished author. We're trying to manage a congressional debate with a lovely scrappy with we're watching one of the Wake Forest public school teachers, best school teachers, Marshall Morelli, for his speaking students. Not the optimists, or the grace and dignity and expertise of Tyson Williams, who organized the greater giving for the nation's capital. And elsewhere. The list goes on. Over the years, we hosted approaching hundreds of the big giants. We ran the gamut from an early tongue-in-cheek titled Pride and Tobacco in the Year, with the help of Bob who was here, and others who are here tonight. 4 gigantic high school tournaments that approached 1,200 participants who went on. Every hour and a half, you'll put somebody in a new place you never was ahead of time, can you imagine? And you're worried about scheduling this class. And the Wassons were here, and others were people that put those things together and made them happen. The tournaments competed with the likes of hurricanes and 9/11, but the show went on. There are scores of former players and assistant coaches here tonight. Too many to name, but each of them have stories to tell. One tournament was memorable was the hosting the 50th National Page. I remember when our guest of honor reception took place, my wife and I were walking into Nola Hall's green room, the big room, as the street quartet, who we had arranged, had just started to play. I nudged my wife and we laughed. This must be what it feels like to be an adult. We said, a long-time farm boy had receded slowly indeed. I remember at the banquet, Martha Swain, who was in the room here, and Sue Darnell, I believe she's was here, and others were at that table with the mayor dined with a former debate coach, the head of the Middle East Institute, which is our topic that year, and hence our speaker. And Martha was dined with George. Remember those moments. And there are lots of them. They've always had an adage that, well, familiar is not quite internalized by many. I counsel whoever puts up with my stories, the key to success is hiring people who are smarter, which some can't do, and which and probably more difficult and decisive, getting out of the, which even more cannot do. Although practicing perfectly, these tenets have guided people. Give people license, and they will inevitably make them proud. I bring this up as confirmed in my life experience. There are so many in this room who fit that description who are smarter, and they have taken in places that we would never have imagined. Our faculty, students, lifelong friends. An exemplar of the school has to be Russ Smith. At least the first part, smarter than. The get out of the way part with Ross was distinctive, as if you had a choice. Ross's legacy endures. Our remembrances remain strong. Jane, Ross's wife, is here this evening, and his 97-year-old mom, Marguerite, had planned to. I also bring this back to publicly acknowledge who also is scary smart, the person who's also scary smart, and in his polite way, helps you get out of the way. And of course, that's Jarrod. Jarrod put all of this together. So, of course, I'm grateful for that. The plaque in front of Carswell to the 3 public puppies and myself elicited tears. The gift is so profound, it speaks to audiences well beyond my personal well-wishing. It took months and permissions and resources and rhetorical acumen to make it not seem pretentious and for it to be part of the university. Jarrod has those gifts. You always hope to leave an institution where it works a little bit better than you came in. Jarrod and Justin and Andrews and many others. I always feel that purpose, at least in that regard, was accomplished. As I reflect on these matters over 45 years, it ends up not being the institution of Wake Forest per se, nor particular events punctuating those years, nor even the life lessons learned, but rather relationships. Those 45 were built on relationships as diverse as the friends in this moment, varying in roles and character and depth and longevity, each unique, each as I have recognized by name some, even as I have recognized some by name, there is a sense I could share, and know this is true, an unforgettable narrative for every person in this room. You all matter to me. Our relationships define what it meant for me to be part of Wake Forest, and has sustained that which across time matters most, each other. Maya Angelou wakes on, and verbally said, the maximum I really like. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. People will never forget how you made them feel. With sincere gratitude.
An amazing evening, and it doesn't have to end now. We're invited to Dr. Louden's home 359 Friendship Circle for the after party, which is set up if you're excited about that. If you are more inclined to get a good night's rest, tomorrow back at Dr. Louden's house on the deck at 10 a.m. will be coffee and pastries from 10 to about 2. If anybody's interested. Thank you all so much for a great evening, and we'll see you all in Lucy.